For almost a decade and a half, the Indian Navy is looking to acquire the multi-role, multi-mission helicopters for its frontline ships. For one reason or the other, this is not fructified. But as President Donald Trump prepares to arrive in India next week, it seems the quest that the Indian Navy has been after to acquire these multi-role helicopters might finally come true. How will that happen? And what else is President Trump and his team looking forward to in India is something that we are going to talk about in this edition of Simply Nitin. I am Nitin Gokhale. Now, the Indian Navy, as I mentioned, has been looking for these multi-role helicopters. The request for proposals or request for information and then request for proposals was floated by the Indian Navy almost 6 years ago. But finally, it seems that the Indian Navy is going to buy the multi-role MH-60 Romeo helicopters from Lockheed Martin for its frontline ships, worth almost $2.6 billion. This deal may be one of the highlights of Donald Trump's visit to India. The other deal that the US team is looking for is the 6 Apache attack helicopters for the Indian Army. As you are aware, the Indian Air Force has already acquired the Apache helicopters for itself, but 6 more are being now acquired for the Indian Army itself. These two are going to be the main highlights of Donald Trump's visit to India and in the defense sector. With no trade deal likely or is on the horizon, I think this is something which is seen as a low-hanging fruit by both sides when the US President is in India next week. The future deals with the US are likely to be, as far as again in defense, are going to be the National Advanced Surface-to-Air Missile Systems for a shield or anti-missile shield for the capital Delhi. Then Sea Guardian killer drones for again the 3 services, across the 3 services, 10 each for all the 3 services. And of course, going forward, some more, maybe the fighter jets that the US is always hopeful of bagging that deal in the coming years. That deal or that contract looks attractive for 110 combat jets for the Indian Air Force, which the request for information has been sent out to 6 different manufacturers across the world. 2 of them, of course, from the US, the Boeing and Lockheed Martin companies, and they are going to field the F-21 from Lockheed Martin, and F-15 apart from F-18 is what looks like is going to be on offer. How will that fructify? How will that come through is a long-term discussion that the Indian Air Force will have. But given what has happened over the last 15 years, it is not very surprising that the US has sold to India defense platforms and weapons worth more than $20 billion if you take into account the likely acquisition of the MH-60 Romeo multi-role helicopters as well as the 6 Apache helicopters. I am not counting the Sea Guardians and the missile shield for Delhi. But if India is increasingly acquiring defense platforms from US, Russians are not very far behind. In fact, in a very unusual move, the Russian embassy in Delhi put out a press release detailing how much defense equipment and platforms the Indians have purchased over the last 10 years or so from Russia. And according to their calculations, these deals have been worth $16 billion. There have been several acquisitions from Russia. But what is the future acquisition that India is looking for from Russia, which clearly shows how New Delhi has balanced its strategic interest and how it has kept the two superpowers or two big powers happy. Now, what is India looking to acquire from Russia? For one, the S-400 missiles, the air defense missiles for both the China border and the Pakistan border, which is in the offing, and which might be creating a friction point between India and US, because US has imposed sanctions against other countries for buying Russian equipment, but nevertheless India is going to go ahead. The other major project that Russia has already signed with India is a joint venture in the gun factory at Korwa near Amethi for manufacturing AK-203 rifles. Although the paperwork still remains to be finalized, it is going to be a major project, and many thousand rifles are going to be produced for the Indian Army and the other two forces where the soldiers will be equipped with the AK-203 rifles. The Kamov multi-role helicopters to replace the aging or already aged helicopters used by Army aviation like Cheetahs and Chetaks, especially in Siachen glacier at a high altitude areas, is also in the offing. Although the initial MOU was signed in December 2015, it has taken a long time for that deal to fructify, but Russia and India both are looking forward to clinch that deal finally. And then of course India has also signed a deal to acquire 3 frigates, frontline frigates from Russia for the Indian Navy. So clearly New Delhi over the last 10 to 15 years has balanced its relationships with defense relationships with both US and Russia. And of course there is the silent player, as you may call it, is Israel. These three have exchanged their positions as number 1, 2 and 3 defense suppliers for India. Is that a good thing to happen? Certainly not, because India continues to import many of its defense requirements from different countries. Remember, Rafale combat air jets deal was signed in September 2015. Worth almost 7.9 billion US dollars, and that first of those Rafales are likely to touch down in India in May this year. So clearly all India's main acquisitions have come from abroad, from major manufacturers across the world. That should ring alarm bells in India, and I think that is one of the reasons why Make in India is a major initiative of the government of India, which hasn't really taken off as yet, although many contracts, many deals are in the offing in the next couple of years. How the government pushes those at a time when the defense budget is shrinking is a challenge that the newly created Department of Military Affairs will have to overcome, and the newly created post of Chief of Defence Staff, the first incumbent General Bipin Rawat, will have to really work across the 3 services and get all of them to agree to buy Indian defense equipment going forward, if India has to make the best use of a meager capital acquisition budget. Capital acquisition means budget to acquire new platforms or new acquisitions, and it is less than 1,20,000 crores. The total budget itself, the defense budget itself, is 3,37,000 crores, which is hardly sufficient for the major need that Indian defense forces have. But nevertheless, on the eve of Donald Trump's visit, it looks like India is going to give him some major contracts that I mentioned right at the beginning of this episode. We will have to wait and watch what else comes across or comes through when he concludes his visit. But clearly, India has so far managed to keep both Russia and US happy. How it sort of translates into strategic gains is something that we'll have to wait and watch. That's all I have to say on this episode. But until next time, it's goodbye.